Have you ever dreamed about a peculiar place more than once? Well, as it turns out, Limansk was actually apparently thought of the same way. Let's take a look at what the designer of Limansk, Ilya Tomachov, has to say. Let me share with you another interesting fact about the creation of this location, which almost no one knows. Long before working on Chistya Neba, I repeatedly had a dream about an unfamiliar small town with yellow houses. It had narrow streets, playgrounds, a square with a non-working fountain, a river, tall poplars. It felt like a place of childhood. An alternate childhood, not my real one. The feelings were so pleasant and cozy, they relentlessly haunted me, that eventually they turned into the idea of a game in their surroundings of the city, and with gameplay based on children's yards games of the 80s. We would play in this hypothetical game as a child. When, while working on Chistya Neba, I was given the task of designing a small cozy town with a linear passage. I realized that this was a great opportunity to base the design of Limansk on my dream city. The craziest and most unusual fact is that after the release of Chistya Neba, the dream did not stop appearing to me, but the city gradually changed from the original to Limansk, or was merged with it. In a dream, for example, a construction crane appeared. I balanced on a concrete slab suspended from a hook, and look at the landscape of Limansk. It is still as cozy to be there as it was years ago. This is apparently from Ilya to Reggash, but Reggash themselves made a giant post about this. And I figure nobody else is really doing this. I mean, yeah, they get to read this, but let's take a look here. Compared to the daily posts on the subreddit that get thousands and thousands of upvotes and comments, this is getting buried, man. So somebody needs to read this. One of the more unique locations in the zone is definitely the abandoned city of Limansk, which is present in Clear Sky and will presumably return in one of the DLCs for Stalker 2. This post will provide a closer look at its origins, early concepts related to it, and other lesser-known facts and details. Even though Limansk is one of the last locations visited in Clear Sky, the player can learn some things about it at earlier stages of the game. From random conversations with stalkers, some will mention that as a result of the large emission, many anomalies changed their location and paths were found, leading to previously inaccessible places such as Limansk, which has strategic importance. The town provides an opportunity to bypass the brain scorcher blocking the way to the center of the zone, so it quickly caught the attention of factions. After the emission, everything seems new. The safe and familiar paths are no longer safe and familiar, and you have to look for new ones in the swamp. The other side of the coin is that you can now reach new parts of the zone, and who knows what secrets can be uncovered there. They say there's even a small town deep in the zone, untouched from Soviet times. As soon as our boss heard about that, he sent a large group to check it out. Then he found out that Duty sent a party there as well, so we told our boys to get a move on. I thought Yantar was right on the edge of what we have explored in the zone, but the emission was so powerful that paths to the Red Forest and the Mosque, that's the lost town, have opened up. A few of our guys went there via the factory, but I don't know if they even got past it. I also heard that Duty and Freedom, the two most powerful clans in the zone, are battling it out for control of Limansk. The way to the north is as good as blocked because of the brain scorcher. They've also found a road to the mosque beyond the forest. The town is small, but strategically important, which is why Duty and our boys are spilling each other's blood over it. After the emission, it turned out that many important roads to the zone center passed through the warehouses. Our advanced groups reached the mosque the other day, a town nobody ever heard of before. Freedom's and Duty's main forces are battling it out somewhere beyond the Red Forest. I hear a path to a small town from before the zone called Limansk was discovered there. The road to the mosque through the Red Forest was discovered recently, and Freedom has already made it there. Duty is trying to do the same. I reckon there's already a bloodbath there as we speak, because they both want control of that shitty town and neither will let the other clan have it. The latest news is that they have found a road to the town of the mosque beyond the Red Forest. Now Duty and Freedom are slaughtering each other over it. Must be a precious little town if they're willing to start such a bloodbath because of it. However, the player learns the most from the forester in the Red Forest, which is also known as the Limansk Wildlife Reserve in the past. When the old man finds out the Scar wants to reach the city, he vaguely points out that it has been inaccessible for good reasons. Limansk was lost for many years, and there are many good reasons for that. It would be best for all of us if it stays lost. What do you want with Limansk? He then explains that the main road leading to the mosque, i.e. the drawbridge over the river flowing between the city and the forest, has been raised by the factions that have reached it. Getting into the mosque is not easy. The shortest road to the city is the bridge, but it's been raised. However, and this came as a surprise to me, it's not the only road that leads there. Freedom and Duty raised the bridge right after the large emission, yet the bandits appeared on the other shore a couple of days ago and captured the bridge. That means there's at least one other way of getting across. The player then has the opportunity to ask Forrester for additional information about Limansk, and he will tell about its history. For a long time, no one heard anything about that town. Many folks don't believe Limansk ever existed, only they're lying. The town exists. I saw it with my own eyes before the first disaster. You see, there was a closed institute there, a real big one, with houses built specifically for scientists and their servants. It was a research institute with some fancy names, something like Radiowave. They put up a huge antenna too, the size of a 5-story building. Real intellectuals, these fellows, only there was never any peace in the mosque. Its residents were always cagey, suspicious of strangers, always muttering something under their noses and praising the Soviet regime, even when we had provision shortages. We country folk used to go around Limansk. The people weren't exactly hardy, and the town kinda made your head hurt. Must have been the antenna. Then Chernobyl happened, but Limansk was not evacuated. They must have screwed something up in the documents, or maybe it was all that secrecy, I don't really know. But that was the last I heard of Limansk. I've got no business there. It can be inferred that some experiments on influencing the human mind were carried out in Limansk even before the first disaster in 1986, which is quite interesting. It shows that the area around the power plant was a place of secret government activities even before it became an exclusion zone. Equally interesting is the mention that the residents weren't evacuated after 25 years. During the events of the prequel, there are no traces of them. Forster also explains why the mosque was cut off from the rest of the zone until recently, and why it became the target of stalkers' attentions. This place used to be full of anomalies, but after the emission it became almost safe. It didn't take stalkers long to realize that you can reach the center of the zone through the mosque without having to go through the brain scorcher. Duty and freedom started a real war as soon as they reached it, and it could well end up destroying them both. And that's it for the lore background from Clear Sky itself. Now let's move on to the origin story and inspiration. The concept of a city located near an antenna with suspicious properties was taken from real life. In the real exclusion zone, there is the famous Duga Radar system, along with various rumors circulated during the Cold War era, and next to which the back then secret town of Chernobyl 2 was located. And while the concept of Limansk itself was created in the fall of 2006, when development of the prequel initially titled Anarchy Cell began, in a way its origins can possibly be traced to an early version of the cut Dead City location from SFC. In 2003, it was assumed that it would be inhabited by zombies who were victims of the influence of the woodpecker, which was an early name for the emitter that would eventually become the brain scorcher. It referred to the nickname given to the Duga Radar, i.e. Russian woodpecker. According to design documents, the player would be able to interact with the zombies and would hear them muttering about the state of their head and the woodpecker. The concept was later abandoned, but the background lore of Limansk is somewhat similar to it, especially since its antenna was directly based on the Duga Radar, with the difference is that the victims of its influence were not zombies in the exclusion zone, but ordinary residents before. In any case, when work on the prequel began, the developers assumed that the city which would be featured in it should be stylistically different from Pripyat known from the original game, and they decided to base its appearance on an area of Kyiv known as the Emergency Settlement. The name comes from the fact that in 1931, emergency barracks were built in this region for residents of nearby villages affected by a flood, also called the German Quarter, located within the Dniprovsky district, near the Chernihivska metro station. The buildings on the streets there were built in the early 1950s by German POWs, hence the second name, and served as an example of post-war architecture. But in 2008, a decision was made to demolish some of them in favor of modern apartments. So, in a way, GSC immortalized the region, or at least the appearance of its buildings, in the game. I recommend watching this excerpt, which I will actually be playing for you, of the making of material for the prequel, which the devs talk about the process of creating new locations, and where a few photos of buildings from this region that they took in early 2007 are shown, which were then used as models to create the in-game ones. The same shots were used in this promotional video. Unfortunately, as far as I know, unlike the available collections of photos from Pripyat and other places that the devs visited during development, there are no publicly available archives of those taken during the development of Clear Sky. But here's a comparison of several buildings from the game with photos from another source. The antenna of the Radiowave Institute that was based on Duga is of course much smaller than its prototype, but this was intentional. According to the developers, they first created a model on a full scale, but then it dwarfed Limansk itself, and since it was supposed to be just one of the elements of its surroundings and not the main thing, they reduced it. I'll come back to the interesting content from the game itself later. For now, let's move on to the early concepts from design docs and sketches. An early description of Limansk can be found in a story synopsis document from 2006. In it, the town is referred to as Limansk 13, the name Ghost City is also used for it. The plot itself was somewhat different from the final version, but the city played the same role. The player would have to go through it in pursuit of STALKER, who is heading to the center of the zone. One of the noteworthy things from it is the explanation of why the river flowing under the bridge to Limansk is impossible to cross. The way to Limansk goes through a river contaminated with radiation, The water in it is opaque green-brown with bubbles. It is impossible to walk through such water, even when the mercenary is standing next to it. He takes damage to the accompaniment of the clicking of the radiation counter. Appropriate signs and warning boards stick out around. On the shore with feet in the center lies a corpse of a stalker in the pose of a man trying to climb out onto land. The player sees the exposed bones of the lower part of the body and half-corroded clothes above the waist. Later, the player hears from one of the characters a story that once tons of witch's jelly poured into this river, after which the water turned into this very jelly. Partly for this reason, the city of Limansk perished. Witch's jelly is the name of an anomaly taken from Roadside Picnic, which was planned during the development of the original game. In the game itself, the river is simply radioactive, apparently to such an extent that mere contact with water causes instant death. Anyway, the description of the city itself is as follows. Limansk, City of Ghosts. The city of Limansk is essentially a large, long street surrounded by houses and dead ends with alleys between them. Limansk has an unusual history. When scientists and technicians from the CNPP lived here, but on the night of the catastrophe in the first mission, something mysterious happened in this place, and they all disappeared. It seems as if all people had been burned by something, only dark silhouettes remained on the walls like frozen shadows. If you know history, Hiroshima or Nagasaki might ring a bell here, especially the silhouettes. In principle, Limansk is quite an old city, houses with balconies and pseudo-columns on facades, architecture of the 50s or the 20th century with characteristic yellow-red plaster, arched openings, attics, old tall poplar trees, a lot of vegetation woven into the crumbling walls of houses. Everything is overgrown with ivy. There are pavilions, bridges across the city river, propaganda sites with honor boards, abandoned playgrounds, courtyards. Although there are some oddities, parts of 3 or 4-story buildings hang in the air in an incomprehensible way, connected to the ground by one support or a piece of wall. On two sides of the main street, soldiers of freedom and duty settled in abandoned houses. To begin with, the mercenary must cross the street and deal with them, and only then will the Clear Sky Squad follow. To pass through the city, the player must eliminate the key points of both factions, mortar nests, snipers, and armored cars standing among the ruins, etc. Then when all this is done, the frantic skirmish between the factions subsides, and the Clear Skies Squad sets off. According to the description, the inhabitants of the town, employees of the power plant, remained there until the second disaster, and after the first emission, the only thing that remained of them were burned silhouettes, a rather eerie concept that hadn't been finalized, just like the idea that parts of some buildings would be suspended in the air. It's also worth noting that the level was supposed to involve even more combat, with clashes between duty and freedom and the use of heavy equipment. According to this original scenario, after going through the boss, the player would enter a vast network of underground catacombs inhabited by mutated soldiers and scientists who worked in these secret subterranean facilities before the disaster, but that's a separate topic. It's worth mentioning, however, that according to a later concept, they could also have been former residents who went to the underground after the second catastrophe. This idea is included in a later DesDoc from 2007, which describes the planned locations. The thing is that this document is not fully publicly available. It's not found in any leaked archives, and we only know about it from the materials of Andrei Levitsky, a Ukrainian writer who received an offer from GSC to become a scriptwriter for Clear Sky in the spring of 2007. Most of his work wasn't used in the final version, though. In the following years, he wrote several novels as part of the licensed Stalker book series, and in 2012 he made a series of short video documentaries about the games titled The Sinister Secrets of Stalker, in which he talked about the history of their development, among other things. In one of the videos concerning unrealized concept of the prequel, he showed several design documents, including the one about the locations. It contains a different description of Limansk, which is as follows. A small provincial town built in the early 1950s by German POWs. Like Pripyat, Limansk has long been abandoned by its residents. The houses are overgrown with wild grapes, the roofs have sagged and collapsed, trees have grown through the fragile adobe walls. Limansk has a characteristic recognizable landscape. Low houses with yellow plaster, semicircular balconies with wrought iron railings, gable roofs with chimneys and slanted television antennas. Once upon a time, it was a very cozy town. During a trip around Limansk, the player will see empty courtyards with garages, homemade tables for playing dominoes, and T-shaped structures for drying clothes, a small city park with a mosaic statue fountain and benches, a playground with a rocket slide, a cockerel, and a giraffe, reproduced with realistic accuracy. Limansk is not like Pripyat. It does not have wide squares and boulevards. Its streets are narrow and uneven. The houses are quite close to each other and at different heights. The city is located on a hilly terrain, and in some places resembles the old districts of Kiev. Limansk is a city of the 50s. It bears the imprint of aristocracy, passed on from the Germans who built it. A small river Ush flows through the city. It exists in reality on the territory of the 30-kilometer zone. The description is longer, but the rest of the text is not visible in the video. It's worth noting that according to this text, Limansk had been abandoned for a long time, just like Pripyat, which contradicts the aforementioned description of the underground, which mentions that its inhabitants could have been former residents of the city. So the fact whether the residents of Limansk were victims of the first emission or not seems to haven't been clearly defined by the developers. It's also worth noting that the documents do not focus on the activities of the Radiowave Institute at all. Unfortunately, unlike in the case of SOC, the numbers of documents and pre-release builds of Clear Sky is very limited, so it's hard to tell when exactly some of the ideas were conceptualized. Anyway, the last thing in the field of design documents is a scenario document from 2007, which contains an interesting idea related to unblocking the path. In the game, the player, with the help of Forrester, helps the mercenary stuck in a space bubble near Limansk, who, after getting out of it and eliminating the renegades, lower the bridge. According to the scenario document, this was only one of 3 possible planned ways to get to the city. The first way would be to join Freedom or Duty and participate in the faction war to weaken the opponent, so that the troops in the town can gain the upper hand. The second way would be to defeat the bandits while fighting on the Stalker's side, and get the coordinates of an underground passage to the city from their leader's stash. Getting the mercenaries out of the anomaly was the third option, and it was supposed to be a bit more extensive as well. In late 2006 or 2007, several sketches of the city's appearance were created by Ilya, the messenger from before, former art director of GSC. There's also an early concept of the location's map. The outline of the location is noticeably smaller than the final version. In the summer of 2007, a more detailed version was created faithful to what is seen in the game. And that would be it for the more interesting things related to the history of its development. Now let's move on to some interesting facts that can be seen during the gameplay. After exiting the tunnel, which if we look at the map would have to be really long, winding, and go through a river, the player encounters bandits whose comrades have also prepared an ambush along the street with the use of mines. It's worth noting that on the outskirts of the city in the Red Forest, the bridge was occupied by renegades who were not found in the city itself. Their presence was most likely a thing so that a player who would participate in the faction war on the side of the bandits wouldn't have to eliminate any fellows, and since Limansk is a point of no return, it's no longer relevant. There are various factions present in the city. Further on, the player encounters a mercenary in the first Monolith unit. They fight with bandits, one of whom is a unique character. He has an exoskeleton and wields an MG. Further north, there is a courtyard with a fountain and remnants of a skirmish between Duty and Freedom, in the form of several corpses of members of both factions. This area is also known for the Easter egg. In the basement of one of the buildings on the west side, there is a room with a device similar to the time travel machine from the Soviet TV series Guests from the Future. It's worth mentioning that in the building on the other side of the yard, which is a grocery store, there is also a basement that can be easy to miss. Some of the Monolith warriors emerge from it during the ambush that takes place there. Behind the courtyard, there is a street blocked by anomalies. Here is a comparison with its concept from the development period. Behind the house occupied by the military unit, located across the bridge in the city center, there is a street full of space anomalies. Noteworthy is the detail of how one of them cut off a part of the bus. Another example of the impact of an anomaly on the environment can be seen at the beginning of this street, where it appears that a springboard collapsed the bridge and destroyed a truck. At the end of the street with anomalies, there is a sign indicating that the inaccessible road leads to Chernobyl P3, an interesting detail, possibly referring to Chernobyl 2. The construction site guarded by a large group of monolithians that the player must face is one of the more infamous locations. The other attraction here is the antenna, which unfortunately cannot be approached. It's worth noting that it is slightly damaged. The final area of Limansk is also the monolith's last bastion, electrified barbed wire, the current of which also flows through a shallow water tank and a sniper on the tower. Come to think of it, it's quite interesting that the monolithians managed to construct such a defensive structure. Once the threat is eliminated, the main Clear Sky unit, consisting of 10, will arrive from the construction site. It's worth noting that, contrary to what some players might believe, Clear Sky was not such a huge force that sent a very large number of people to the center of the zone. We can only count about 24 of them in the city. In the Limansk, the player can find 13 stashes, the descriptions of which refer to the experiences of their former owners who arrived in the city earlier. For instance, the description of carpet bag and attic, a stash located in the building south of the Institute, implies that fights in the city can last for days. We spent 2 days fighting off attacks. By the end of it, they made us retreat up to the roof, but that's when our reinforcements arrived. I spotted a case in the attic, but forgot to take it with me. As for other interesting facts, there is a detail that can only be seen in Limansk at night. Near the courtyard with a fountain and at the construction site, signal flares are periodically fired into the sky to illuminate the area. Finally, it's worth mentioning the music that plays in the location. The Limansk theme, Ghost City, was composed by Alexei Molchuk, and it includes elements such as children's laughter or piano noises that can be possibly interpreted as subtle sounds from the past of the ghost town. Here are some other extra facts related to Limansk. In the game, above Van's workbench in the Chornobyl base, in Sakara's bunker, and in Forrester's tower, there are calendars from Limansk dating back to 1985. In certain collector's editions of Clear Sky, this calendar was included as a poster. The subtitle reads, Posjetite nash Solnechny Gorod, or Visit Our Sunny Town, along with 1985 and, of course, Limansk. The artwork was done by Ivan Kivrenko, an artist who created many of the series' promotional arts, together with the aforementioned Tomachov. Interestingly, the texture of the calendar in the game was originally different and looked like this. So there is a bit of difference there. The texture was changed in the first patch for the game to match the poster. Unfortunately, as far as I know, there is no high-quality version of the original available. The Limansk calendar can also be seen in one of the iconic color-appropriate promotional artworks made by Kivrenko on the right above the stalker. Yeah, I guess so. That is a good eye. Check that out. As I mentioned at the beginning, the player can hear about Limansk from stalkers in several locations, and it was planned that Sidorovich would also mention the city. In the game files, there were several unused dialogues of the traitor, one of which refers to the effects of the large emission and how the path to Limansk has suddenly appeared. Man, that was one heck of an emission. Stronger than I can remember, that's for sure. It hit us so hard glass was bursting in my bunker, and it's right on the edge of the damn zone. I don't know why it happened, but it sure as hell changed something. The word on the grapevine is that they found a road that leads to the old town of Limansk. Imagine that. Stalkers spent years wandering the woods looking for a way through the walls of anomalies, and then one day it just appears out of nowhere. There's not even any radiation anywhere along the road. It's the same with the swamps. It used to be that you could only get there by military chopper, but these days you can even walk there if you're not afraid of getting your feet wet. In the subsequent cut dialogue, he also briefly mentioned the conflict of duty and freedom in the city. War. War is the same anywhere you go, and the zone is no exception. Sure, folks will always find reasons to fight, be it loot or beliefs, but there was always order and everyone knew its place. It's different now after the emission. While duty and freedom were fighting over Limansk like two hungry dogs over a bone, the bandits became real cocky and started squeezing stalkers pretty damn hard. In the multiplayer mode of Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat, there's a map based on Limansk. Its description is as follows. A small district of the enigmatic city of Limansk, abandoned apartment blocks and one half-constructed building between them. When several expensive artifacts were found here, the news spread all over the zone all too quickly. A few roads were open to Limansk, and the shooting hasn't stopped for a minute ever since. Like all multiplayer maps, it is playable in all 4 game modes. In the ending of Call of Pripyat, in the segment regarding Lieutenant Sokolov, if he survives the events of the game, it would be mentioned that he was shot down over Limansk by mercenaries. Senior Lieutenant Sokolov continued to take part in flying missions over the zone. During one such recon flight over Limansk, his aircraft was shot down by mercs. 2 weeks later, he was picked up by a patrol near the cordon. Within a month of his rescue, Sokolov had left the Air Force, joining a civil airline instead. In the segment regarding information about psi installations obtained by Digiterev, a photo of the Limansk's antenna together with the brain scorcher is shown. This might imply that it was indeed used in some early research regarding the use of psi emissions. Finally, moving on to the sequel, the outskirts of Limansk can be seen across the raised bridge at the edge of the Red Forest. In the storyline, the player goes to this area in search of Spirit during the Boundary quest. He apparently wanted to find his place in the city. Anyway, on the tower at the checkpoint, which is now much more damaged, there is a dead Spark member who has a PDA with a content called Arzursky's Chat with the Sparker. We've been picking up an odd signal coming from Limansk lately, time to figure out what's going on there. Head to the coordinates, find some high ground, and record whatever you hear. I have filed the request for equipment with the warehouse. It'll be ready for pickup whenever you need it. The equipment in question, a radio receiver, can be found at the top of the tower, and after interacting with it, the player will hear this strange signal. It sounds like human screams mixed with some unidentified noises. We can only guess the meaning and origin of it, but it's safe to assume it's a DLC teaser of sorts. In the leaked build of the game, the scene with the radio was presented differently. Since this subreddit is not a good place to discuss such topics, I won't go into details. And that would be it. Limansk is definitely one of the more atmospheric locations in the series. Unfortunately, the dynamic gameplay rhythm may prevent the player from fully appreciating it. And let's see if we can get some more information out of the comments. Thank you so much for this, commenter says. I always get so giddy when I see your lore posts, never mind when it's one of my favorite topics. Although that makes me wonder how the leaked scene of the radio was presented. Well, in the build, there was a stalker on the tower, placeholder for a scientist, who asked the player for food because he set out to conduct an experiment but miscalculated about the supplies. The player could ask him about the experiment, and he would reply that radio signals resembling a whisper among the static are being received from Limansk, and he's trying to find their source, and that this tower is the only place where the signal can be picked up. He would also offer to exchange medicine for food. The signal itself was not implemented. Overall, the released version is more interesting and intriguing, in Regash's opinion. And to head this off with kind of the link from the beginning, Limansk, the concept of which he was responsible for, Tomachov, was partly inspired by the city he had dreamed of more than once that evokes some non-existing childhood memories. When he was commissioned to design the location, this dream city was in a way utilized as a basis. Apparently, Ilya's account had been suspended, so Reggash is picking up for him, which is quite nice. Anyway, that is the story of Limansk.